Hudson, this is the king of magic conventions. Are you looking forward to this one?
Do you think he's brought Stu?
Maybe. Let's find out.
If Stu's not here, I'm out. That's...
Welcome everybody to the What's Going On podcast. Your friends Young and Hudson are here as always. Today we have a very special guest. I've only got to know this fantastic person this year, and we have had such long phone conversations because we share a lot of the same interests in magic and Vegas and all the rest of it. You may know him as a performer. You may know him as the man behind Magic Magazine. You definitely know him as the man behind the incredible Magic Live convention. Stan Allen is our guest today. Stan, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Bye, Hudson. Because Stu is not here.
What's happened to Stu? Where is Stu? Have you still got him, or is he in some sort of museum, or have you given him away?
Oh no, Stuart is. Where's he at? He's in the act case. That's it. He doesn't come out. It's not out very much.
I didn't know if he'd made it into Copperfield's warehouse or something yet, or or something at the Magic Castle or something.
Well, it's a funny thing. The original Stuart is in bad shape, and that's the one that will probably go over to David's. Now, what he does with it is up to him, but he mentioned it. I've said yes. So,
by the way, for listeners who don't know, Stu is Stan's rabbit.
This is a very strange conversation.
Okay. This is not his brother. It's not Stu Allen who we're talking about. It's Stan's pet puppet rabbit that he used to do in his comedy act.
Stan has interviewed more magicians than I have, and so we're going to obviously talk all about that. But also, there's a prolific performing career behind this. Stan, I genuinely don't know. Do you still do gigs and stuff, or is it?
I don't do gigs. I rarely perform. I performed at Friends things like Bill Smith's Magic Expo on the Queen Mary this last year, and he wanted a few of his old Long Beach Mystic buddies to do it. And I'm also, I think it's either this January or next January will mark 50 years of me doing this silly little rabbit puppet. And it all started at the Magic Castle. So they've been very kind and said, please come back and do a week sort of as a farewell. My first retirement gig will be there, I guess.
So I've done lots of reading about you in the last couple of days, and one of the things, it was just almost sort of passed over in an interview I read with you. I think it was with Will Houston for the Magic Circular magazine, was that for a short while you were mentored by Channing Pollock, which is just amazing, because to me, this legendary guy we can see footage of. Just a simple question: what was he like as a person? Because I think we've all probably got in our heads kind of what we imagine he was like, very suave, sophisticated, but what was it like for him to help you with your work?
Well, Channing was a very shy man. He was very quiet. He'd be the soft-spoken one in the room. But through his presence, he just commanded attention. But it wasn't something he was trying to do. He was shy. We got very lucky. He did a lecture for some reason for a friend or something at a little IBM meeting in Long Beach. And I wasn't there, but Mike Caveney was. And Mike and another mystic guy went up to him afterwards to talk to him. And he said, well, look, if you like this kind of stuff, he was talking a lot about metaphysical things at the time. If you like this, here's my phone number. Give me a call. You can come up to the house. So I guess for us at 19, 20 years old, whatever Channing Pollock wanted to talk about, we were definitely interested in. And so we went up for a Monday night, 5 of us. So he said, bring some friends. And I was lucky to be one of the friends. And we went up that Monday night. And like you, we were all just kind of like in awe. And at the end of the night, he says, well, great. How's next Monday night? And we did that for about a year. And it was great. I mean, we just, How often do you get to meet your heroes or people that you're just so in awe and then they live up to it? But he was also a very humble guy. He had this he lived up in Beverly Hills, up in a mansion thing. Not quite a mansion, but up in definitely a high rent district. And he had this beautiful crystal decanter, and we drank red wine from it. And one night it was empty, and he goes into the other room and he brings out this jug of like inexpensive red wine, unscrew the lid, fills it up, the decanter, and we're going, what? He goes, oh, I really like the taste of this wine. So he wasn't about playing a role. Channing just was the role. Again, when I was 17, a few years earlier, Peter Pitt was recording a special, a pilot for a special, and he had two guests, Di Vernon, Channing Pollock. So he's talking his old friend Channing Pollock into doing the show. And Channing says, I don't even have a girl assistant. And Peter says, I've got just the girl. Turns out it was my sister who had assisted a number of people. So she goes up and works with Channing Pollock, and I got to go to the filming. And in rehearsal, he's in full tails dress, the whole thing. He walks into the back of the room, and it's like in a movie. Everybody shuts up slowly and turns around and looks, and Channing strolls up. And the director says, well, Mr. Pollock, let me know when you're ready. He had been in the room for 15 minutes, and he just calmly said, I'm ready. So he was all loaded, ready to go. And he gets up onto the little stage, and he's doing the thing. And when he does the toss of the dove to the silk, he misses, and the dove goes to the floor. And Channing kind of just glances back, turns to the director and says, there'll be applause here. And I just sat there at 17 saying, he's the coolest man on the planet. No question about it.
It's quite interesting. Just a tiny thing you said in that was like, he said, should we do it again next Monday? Do you sometimes, I know I certainly got this impression, sometimes the top guys, that maybe they're just a bit lonely. Like, is it like, especially when he was so cool and so like, I think everybody just assumes the guys at the top who have a fantastic look have got this great social circle around them. But it's that old saying, isn't it? It's lonely at the top sometimes, I think. Do you think that?
Well, I don't know. In high school, they told me some of the most beautiful girls in the school were at home on Saturday night. I didn't personally experience this because I wasn't in their league, but maybe there is something to be said. They're almost unapproachable.
I think in magic as well, though, right? It's, you kind of want people, like, let's say you've been in magic for a long time. You tend to speak to people who've been in magic only a little bit of time and less because you've got less in common with them, because you're on a different wavelength, are you? Let's be honest. You look at the things differently, and and I don't like their enthusiasm, to be honest. They're too enthusiastic about it. They love everything. I'm not into that. Right? But if you've been in magic a long time, you kind of want to speak to other people that have been in magic for a while, don't you? That's the other thing sometimes. So I don't know, or at least know stuff about it. I don't know.
The other thing about Channing was he wasn't really in magic at that point. He only did his act for about 7 years. The joke was 7 minutes, 7 doves, 7 years or something. Now, he went back and he did the songs and a few other things. And while he was very up on magic, he wasn't really in magic. And so we learned more, I think, about life from Channing, life as a professional, just life in general. And that was amazing, because my other mentor was more like somebody I looked up to was Marvin Roy. And he was that enthusiastic, everything is beautiful, and just can't get enough. Let's talk magic. And if you wanted to talk something other than magic, Marvin was like, what else is there to talk about? Kind of thing.
Was he a happy guy, you think, generally, day to day? Channing?
Yeah, I think he was. He was just, he was so laid back. And he also brought guests to us. So like an Alan Wakeling came over one night, and we all sat and chatted with Alan Wakeling about things. And
Stan, can I ask a question about your performing career? Because I know, like, Young does a lot of research for this podcast, right? And I'll be honest,
because I'm a professional. Right? Because I'm a professional.
Right? I do absolutely nothing. So, but I think I'm like the listener. I know you from mainly two things: Magic Magazine and Magic Live, and some people may have seen the actor as Stu, right? But I don't really know your sort of pre-history before, say, Magic Magazine and that sort of thing. Were you a full-time pro on the comedy circuit? Or?
I was sort of bouncing around, not knowing where I was going, and I was doing some magic shows and working other places and things. And then when I was 25, a friend of mine came back from Tannins, and he had this little gray puppet. And I said, you know what? My girlfriend would love this puppet. So I had other motives for this puppet. And so I buy this puppet, $28.50. Get it? She plays with it, but I'm thinking, yeah. So I put it up on the shelf, and it sat there for 2 years. And I was at the time working at the Magic Castle down in the little museum downstairs was the parlor at the time, or the showroom. And I had been doing the same act for way too long, and I just knew I had to do something different. And I sat by a pool one day at my apartment, and I sketched out some ideas with this puppet, and I went upstairs to my apartment and I played with it a couple times and said, "Nah, it's fine." And that night, we did 4 shows a night. So I had it in my table the whole time, and I chickened out on the first 3 shows. And on the 4th show, the audience is one of those audiences, where you can't do anything wrong. They just love everything you do. The audiences where none of your friends are in that audience to see you killing,
Yeah.
And so when it came up to the last trick, I said, well, look, do you want to see the old ending of the act, or do you want to see the brand new ending of the act? And the crowd all says, new ending. And I said, well, great. It's not my fault then. And I did a minute and a half with this little puppet, and they all laughed in the right places. And I sort of never looked back, and my phone started ringing. And so I got booked at comedy clubs. And also later that year, I was picked up by Princess Cruises, and I became one of their 4 magicians. And it was a man named Lee Edwards, most people have never heard of, but it was Martin Lewis, me, and Charlie Miller were the 4 magicians. And we worked on the ships all the time. So for the next 8 years, on and off, I worked for Princess, both on land in their sales division, doing shows, and then there. So my professional career was a lot on ships with some comedy clubs at home, type of thing.
So if you're doing ships, we know this. We've had other cruise ship magicians on the podcast. There's a lot of downtime. Is that where your kind of writing begins? Like the kind of, creating what we would say today as creating content? Is that where that began?
You would think I would do something productive with that time, but you're looking at a guy that got through COVID and said, what did I do for the last 2.5 years? No, I had a great time out there. And the way my act developed, the way I wrote, I don't sit down and write things out very often. I sketch that first thing out, but I believe in reverse writing. You do it on stage, and if it works well, then you write it down and you put it in your little script. Also, I was working in comedy clubs and on cruises. So on the cruise ship in those days, you did 3 different shows for the same audience. So if they liked your first show, they were there for your second show, and you didn't have to reestablish. So you could just walk out and say, how was your day in Puerto Vallarta? And they would tell you, and you could do 5 minutes just chatting with them. Lady says, I took a chance on a Mexican blanket. Oh, you bought a blanket? No, just took a chance on one. Ta-da-boom. And so it was very relaxed. And for that second show, well, I should explain. The very first cruise I did everything I could do with the puppet in the first show. And people came up to me on deck when's your next show? I said, tomorrow night. Why? Well, we want to see more with that rabbit. Can't wait to see more with the puppet. And I'm thinking, yeah, neither can I. And I had to make up acts. I had a postcard, Princess, with black tape on it, cut it like a mask, and did a sort of Glenn Falkenstein mask type mentalism thing, and did floating a rabbit. And I just started making stuff up. But remember, they were friendly audiences. So I ended my last show with a bedtime story where I'm doing this musical thing with the rabbit and he's falling asleep. But then I would come on land and I would take the bits that played the best and make those into the 15 minutes that comedy clubs wanted, and do it over and over and over again. And that's where you get the little touches in. Then you go back on the ship and you stretch it out as long as you can, trying all these little things. So it was a combination of the stretching and then the repetitiveness that the gestures hopefully got good.
So my understanding is the magazine started as effectively what we would say here in England, like a leaflet, like a very small thing. Tell the story of the beginning of Magic Magazine.
Well, through a whole different story, I ended up with a magic shop. And we had a little school. And one day a guy walked in that was helping me. and he was carrying a mimeograph machine. What is this? It's all these one of these crank things, and ink, making a mess everywhere you went. He says, we're going to put out a newsletter and generate some business. So we got a mailing list together, and we just put out a little 2-page newsletter, and business took off better. And so every month we would do a newsletter. And so for years and years, I had done these little newsletters through the Magic Shop, and then later helped the Long Beach Mystics do a newsletter. And then in 1985, my wife said, everybody loves your newsletter. Have you ever thought of doing that professionally? So I launched something called Inside Magic, and it became an 8-page newsletter that had a very strong following. It was about only 12 or 1,300 subscribers. But when I sent out dues notices, 95% of them came back right away paid. So I had very loyal readers, but just not enough. And we told you who was going to be on television. And so it was popular. And then in 1990, Magic Manuscript, Tannins, went out of business. And Hank Lee called me up and said he was going to start a magazine and he wanted to hire me as an editor. And I explained to him that my wife says I should wear a t-shirt that says, doesn't play well with others. And he also runs with scissors. And so I said, no, I don't want to work for anybody. The next day he called me back and he said, fine, we'll do a partnership. I said, a partnership? What does that look like? I'll put up the $70,000 needed to launch the magazine. And it'll be a 60-40 split. You take care of the content, I take care of all the business. And I jokingly said to him, you put up all that money, you should make more than 40%. And he said, fine, 50-50. And I said, well, let me think about it. And that was in December of 1990. And in May of 1991, I called him back and said, I've thought about it. And I had researched it. I had driven people like Caveney and Steinmeier and Kaufman nuts with my zillions of questions. And I'd done all the research and decided that there wasn't enough money in there for partners and that I was going to do it on my own. And that became Magic Magazine. And we launched in September.
I remember once hearing at some point, was that about 9 or 10,000 subscribers? Is that right? Or is that
in our peak, we were a little over 10,000. Bill Larson.
10,000.
Bill Larson was, first of all, the nicest man. And when I had my newsletter, he would call me up and say, I don't have anything for Jeannie Speaks. And my newsletter was going to be out before Jeannie Speaks was out. So I'd fax him a copy of it and he would make notes from it and say, hey, by the way, this thing's going to be coming up. My friend Stan Allen told us if you don't get his newsletter, you should. So just a wonderful relationship. But Bill was a smart businessman. I used to announce every year to all of my subscribers what the new rate was going to be. And Bill said, why did you do that? Now they all get together and talk and complain about it. What he did at Jeannie was just throughout the year, he just upped the rate, didn't tell anybody. He said, nobody remembers what they paid last year. And he also would say, we have 8,000. I think he got to 8,800 people, and we just want to get over 10,000. Everybody send somebody, and we'll make that 10,000. That's my big goal. And a couple of years later, they had dropped down to 7,800. And he never said that. He just said, hey, we can still get to that 10,000. Here's my goal. And they were way lower, 6,000-ish or something. And he was still claiming the 10,000. And we actually broke 10,000. And I think our maximum was in 2001, 10,400 total paid readership with shops and with subscribers.
I've heard you say that you think that 9/11 was a bit of a turning point for the magazine in terms of subscriber numbers.
Yeah, I think it absolutely was. 9/11, September 11th, was 4 days before the November advertising deadline. November was the largest month. It's where everybody ran ads. And in those days, we might have been running in November, would be a fat month, so maybe 60 pages of advertising, 65 pages of advertising. We were a 132-page magazine at that point. So it was a huge advertising revenue month for us. So I think advertising was around $500 or $600 a page. So you're looking at $30,000. So when 9/11 hits, and everybody in the United States, none of my generation had ever felt threatened, ever. My parents Yes, Pearl Harbor. But the United States, we hadn't had the things that like the UK has had, with terrorist acts. So it hit everybody so hard, and we just wanted to gather our kids and our family around us and just go into a cocoon. And that meant that people just said, yeah, I can't get an ad together. So we went from probably 65 down to 35. And I thought for sure it's going to come back in December month. And it came back a little, but it sort of never came back 100%. And part of that was the internet was catching up. And so it was, I guess, a turning point where people said, well, I didn't advertise this year. Maybe I don't even need to advertise. And that was sort of the slow decline of magic shops closing up. And they carried our magazine and promoted our magazine, of course, and then also advertising. So the internet is what ended magazines, and rightfully so, too, because magazines used to be the most effective way to advertise a new product or advertise your name. You came up with a great new trick. You would send it into the magazine and they would print it and people would say, hey, who is this guy? And you did that a couple times and you'd get booked at a convention and then eventually it was a stepping stone. It was a great stepping off point. And for advertising, well, it was cheaper than running your own mailing list and paying all the postage and you could get to 10,000 people with us. Well, when the internet did advertising for nothing, and when you could put your trick out instantly and not wait for 6 months, possibly, or 4 months, the internet was just more efficient. The magazines were more efficient than whatever was before it, but something new and efficient had come along. I mean, we knew 6 years in advance that, the magazine was dying.
Do you know, Hudson, what I'm just thinking right here is that Stan has just told us that people used to pay to subscribe to the magazine and they get 42 pages of adverts. I put one advert on this thing and Nyman goes mental and tells me I have not
just Nyman. Lots of people didn't like your adverts. But in the Magic magazine, I used to really enjoy the adverts. I think that was a big reason why people would get it, because there was a point where, but magazines before that, especially in the UK, we had Abra magazine. But when Magic magazine kind of came out, and there's all these glossy adverts, like full page, full color, and it was really exciting as a thing. But it was a big part of it, wasn't it? I think a lot of people subscribe, obviously for the content, right? But I'm saying I think a big part of it was the adverts.
Have naked pictures, so yeah, it had to be the content of the adverts.
But I do remember you talking about naked pictures, Stan. You've actually said that you really did kind of base it a little bit on Playboy magazine, didn't you? In terms of the kind of interviews that were inside and stuff, you wanted them to be a little bit more provocative, a little bit deeper than just a PR piece. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is fair to say, and also. When I said to people I'm going to launch a magazine, I got all kinds of feedback on it. And some of them would ask me, well, what magazine, or do you want to be like Sphinx? Do you want to be like Genie? And I was like, no. And I want to have the depth of a Time magazine, or more important, the sidebars of Time magazine, because the story would get a little long, but the sidebars were always worth reading because a submarine is dropped down to the ocean and can't get up. On the sidebar, they tell you how a submarine works. Yeah, it's really fascinating, little related things. And then I wanted the shallowness of People magazine, because people like to know about people and they like to know, inside stuff on people. And the photographs, Life magazine. I mean, that was our dream. We had some nice photographs, but Life magazine was famous for their photographs. And then for interviews, Playboy magazine for interviews. They did those in-depth interviews. And so I was picking and choosing from what I considered to be the best magazines and the best parts of the best magazines. Now, did we attain all of that? Well, no, but that's what we were shooting for. That was the goal.
The first time I ever bought an issue of Magic magazine was on my first trip to Las Vegas, and it was on the counter in Houdini's magic shop. Bear in mind, I'm a Brit, right? And I'll never forget it. It was this incredible photo of Chris Kenner sat on the edge of the stage with the Copperfield's elevator hanging behind him. And I was like, what is this? And it's a big interview with Chris Kenner. I just couldn't believe it. It was such an exciting thing. I've heard you say, Stan, that going hand in hand with what you've just said, that you realized you weren't actually in the magazine business. You were in
No.
the information business, and that's what people were after. Do you wish you'd have tried to, as we've talked about here on the podcast before, move with the venue as the venue changed? Do you wish you'd have maybe sort of tried to do a subscription thing early with a website or something? Or
We tried a number of things. Yes, I wish we'd been successful. But we did a thing like, what did we do? Magic Plus. And what that was video clips online locked. And you could sit with your magazine and put your code in, you could get in there, and now you could watch videos of what we're talking about. Somebody walked into my office and said, take a look at this, and they handed me their new phone, their new iPhone. And there was a copy of Wired magazine on the iPhone. And I flipped through it and I said, nobody's going to read a magazine on a phone. So that's what kind of a genius I was. And we did not go after the phone, and we should have.
You know, Stan, there's something that springs to mind that you and I have in common with this, is that you've talked about just the relentless consumption that a magazine is. In fact, a great saying I read was you said a magazine is never finished, because as soon as you just have to go to print and then you immediately move on to the next one. And listen, I have that issue here. I'm sure subscribers understand that. I'm constantly searching for new ideas for our podcasting. I want to ask you, we have a lot of brilliant young magicians who subscribe to this podcast, and they're content creators. And one of them in particular I talk to sometimes is called Jack Rhodes. Our subscribers here know him very well. And he is putting out stuff all the time as well. And it must really drive him crazy. I know it affects me, constantly trying to think of new ideas. You did it for 25 years with Magic Magazine. How did you do it? How did you just keep going and keep your brain trying to think of new interesting things for the people that were subscribing?
If you ask my wife, what does your husband do? She would tell you, he's the Pied Piper. He plays this flute, and all these people come around to help him accomplish things and do things. And the magazine was the first real experience of that. Magic Magazine was successful for a number of reasons, one of which we tried to do it better and different than anything out there. So, okay, but just our own efforts wouldn't have made it quite the same. Genie Magazine, due to Bill Larson's health declining, the magazine was declining. And so the magic world was looking for a magazine that was going to come out on time, because you can't advertise something if you don't know it's going to come out. So we became the go-to people there. They wanted to get their stories out in a nicely laid out way. Well, Magic Magazine, we were the first people, I think, to hire a full-time art director, that worked all month long on making that magazine look better. And I just am a firm believer that it's a quote from Walt Disney about keeping Disneyland clean from the early days. And what he said was, if we keep our park really clean, then our guests will help us. If we let our park get dirty, our guests will help us do that as well. And so I think Magic community is really a giving community. They want to see things better in Magic. When someone asked Jeff McBride, I learned this later, what kind of magazine is this new Magic magazine going to be? And Jeff said, this is going to be a magazine that magicians will feel proud to leave on their coffee table for when their layman friends come over. Okay, that's a hell of a compliment. So I had those people, my initial team, Mike Caveney, Jim Steinmeier, Richard Kaufman, Stephen Minch, Max Maven. All of these people were on my go-to contributing editors, and they would all call me up. Steinmeier was unbelievable. He would call me up with stories I had no idea were coming out. So I was really in the eye of the storm, but these other people that wanted this stuff to happen. Steinmeier, in the second month, sent me an ad he wanted to run, and he had a check clipped to it. Now, I'd been picking his brains for 7 months. I called him up and I said, Jim, I can't take your money. And Jim said, there'll come a time where you won't need my money, and that's fine. This is not the time. Cash the damn check.
Wow.
Hang on. Were they all working for free?
Yeah.
Young, don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. This is nothing. This is not for your ears, Young.
Well, and when I say working, I mean, I was pestering them. Same with Magic Live. I think up some of the things, but I don't think up everything by any means. It would be very flat. And these content creators, I don't know. My head just couldn't push out that kind of thing. And people who have, like Luis D'Amatos, the first time I met him, he had just done 100 half-hour television shows or something. And I said, well, what are you doing now? And he said, I'm on input. What? I'm on a 3-month trip around the world, everywhere I can go. I'm going to museums and I'm going to plays. I'm seeing shows. I'm on input. I can't come up with any more ideas until I put more input in.
Wow, that's great, isn't it? Yeah. Hey, I know that you, of all the people you interviewed for Magic Magazine, the one that you say you had the most fun interviewing was Paul Daniels. And I was very lucky in 2016, 2015 it was, I interviewed Paul Daniels. What I still believe to this day was the last interview he did for the Magic community before his rather sudden passing, which, and I'll say this, I may upset a few people here, but there's a few legends in Magic. This is just me as a 40-year-old who I feel like they get rammed down our throats a little bit. This one's a legend. This magician's really a legend. And actually, do you know what? I don't think we celebrate Paul enough and all of his great work. A couple of weeks ago, you may have seen that we had a podcast with Ian Keeble and Alex McAleer. They sat down, they rewatched the Paul Daniels Easter special from 1985. So if you're listening to this now, you can go and listen to that straight after. Ian is the most knowledgeable person on Paul Daniels. But Stan, why, of all the interviews you did, why was Paul Daniels the most fun?
Well, Paul Daniels was an interesting situation. I had seen Paul at the Magic Castle. I didn't meet him. And he was holding court. And he was on. He was Paul. And I'm more like Channing. I'll back up. If somebody else is being loud, boy, I'll just keep backing up and quiet. I didn't even go up and introduce myself. I didn't say hello or anything. And then I was going to be in the UK, and I reached out to Ali Bongo, who was working on the show, and he said, come by the studio. So this was on a Monday. So I go over to the studios, BBC Studios, or wherever this was, workplace, and I met Paul there. And I just got to sit back and watch him prepare for a filming they were going to do Friday night. And I was just like, I mean, they're selecting tricks they're going to record for Friday night. And they still don't have all the tricks. And Paul's never seen these tricks. And it's just so casual, like, sure, Paul, do it. Throw the instructions away and give me the prop and I'll go do it and everything. And so at the end of this, he said, we'll have dinner out at my house. So we jumped in his car, and now I spent that 45 minutes in his car with him. And there he wasn't holding court. And I genuinely liked him, became quite fond of him. So that sort of opened it up. And so now when I got to, I don't even know what convention, I did it 2 or 3 times, interviewed him live on stage, we had this bit of a friendship. And the thing about Paul is, Paul can dish it out. He'll take zingers at you. But Paul could also take it. You could throw a zinger back at him. Like I said, you do know we have the same birthday, April 6th. And he said, no, I didn't know that. I said, well, mine was much later, of course, in years. And he looks at me and he just goes, so that's how this is going to go. And it was all good. The other thing with Paul, I think it was an old Sammy Davis Jr. Story of, I feel like if Paul gets out of bed in the middle of the night and wants a snack and he opens up the refrigerator door, and if the light goes on, Paul does 20 minutes.
It's true. We always used to say whenever he walked in a room, he heard the soundtrack to his TV show. It was Rob James who first said that. It was so true. He was always on, wasn't he, Hudson?
Yeah, well, it was. I think we told that story before on here, but going into an Indian restaurant, we were all quite excited that we were going to this Indian with Paul, and we walked through and we went, oh, our table's over there. They've got our table, and he just kind of went, an audience, and he went straight over to tables, sat down with people, started picking up forks, bending the fork for them, or whatever, just doing tricks, and went, oh, we've lost him. We've lost it. He's got an audience. Okay, there you go.
Mine was one afternoon, Debbie and Paul were in Vegas. And so they said, let's have lunch. So my wife, Rhonda, and I go to this place. And it's a sit-down restaurant, but kind of a barbecue-ish flavoring. And I don't know at first what's going on, but Paul is looking past my wife and looking at a little girl at the table across the way. And the mother is berating her to keep wiping her face because she's getting barbecue sauce on herself. So Paul takes his finger and he dips it in the barbecue sauce and he goes, and he smiles at the little girl, and the girl's eyes get really big. And then he dips his finger and he does another one. And pretty soon it's all over his face. And the girl finally just breaks down giggling. And the mother is like, what's going on? Turns around and looks. She starts laughing. And Paul gets up, never wiping his face, by the way, goes over to the table and chats with them. And pretty soon he's doing tricks for the little girl. And I'm just going, yeah, I'm not that magician by any means. By any means.
I miss him. I do miss him.
Yep.
So last week, of course, here in England was the London Magic Convention, which was a great big success. And if it's okay, we'd love to talk to you a little bit about Magic Live, Stan. First question. How did the first Magic Live happen? What was the catalyst for that? Because I assume there's an element of putting some money up front, booking the venue, booking the acts. Bit scary, I imagine. How did the first one happen?
We were coming up to 10 years of Magic Magazine. And at about 8 years in, I'm starting to think about how do you celebrate 10 years? Will I make it to 10 years? If we do, I'm going to throw a damn party.
2001 then, right?
So yeah, 2001, September would be the anniversary issue.
Right.
But also, I was turning 50 in 2000. And I had some friends that had turned 50, and let's just say they hadn't turned 50 gracefully. And I said, well, I can't do anything about it. I'm going to turn 50. How can I make this a better experience? So I decided I want to find something I want to do, take up some new hobby, do something, and I'm not going to start it until I turn 50. So now mentally, I'll play this game, and I'll look forward to my 50th birthday. It'll be exciting.
That's a great idea, by the way. That's a great idea.
And Magic Live is a result of that 50th birthday, a magic convention. So this just goes to show you what kind of an idiot I am. So, because I firmly believe if you take a brain and you remove half of it, you get a Magic Magazine editor. And if you accidentally remove more than half, then you get a Magic Convention producer. And so you see where I was at. So I had these months, and my son was in junior high, and I used to drive our kids to school and then go off to work. And so we never turned the radio on. Now, some mornings it was pretty quiet. 13-year-old kids, they want to be quiet. Other mornings, chit-chat, chit-chat, chit-chat. So with my son, I threw out the idea of like, hey, we're going to have a 10th anniversary. What should it be? And he and I every morning would just brainstorm what it could be. And originally we talked about a tour, a display tour that could go play all the conventions around the country about Magic, 10 years of Magic Magazine. It could be a giant party we just throw somewhere and invite anybody who's a subscriber to Magic Magazine to come, and we'll throw them a huge party. The magazine was successful. We were at our highest numbers. And then the third one was a book. Well, everybody does a book. So we kept talking about it, and we narrowed it down to a party, and it became a convention. And then the ideas like the very first convention, your badge was a photo of you on the cover of Magic Magazine. And also the idea that we weren't going to tell anybody who was booked. Whole thing was going to be a surprise. And also, it was an easy convention to throw because we had a roadmap. We are bringing the pages of Magic Magazine to life. So how do you do that? Well, here's the cover. Put it on your name badge. Next is some ads. Okay, that's a dealer's room. Will be the advertiser's fair. And then the editor will speak at the first conference from the editor. And so we booked people like Steinmeier and Kaufman and Caveney, and everybody who was writing regularly for the magazine were our speakers for that year. So it was a logical progression to throw this convention. And it truly was one time only, never to be repeated. So,
Famous last words. Stan, in
oh
today's
gosh.
world, and it's obviously we know it's grown and grown and grown, but actually, as we've just talked about, everything you could ever want to know about magic, if we're being honest, is written down somewhere. Okay, either in an
Well,
old
sure.
magic magazine or it's online. Why do magicians still go to magic conventions? There's the thrill of the dealer hall, of even going and seeing the new tricks. You see them, the trailer now, a month before. Why do you think in 2024 Magic Live is selling out quicker than it's ever sold out? Blackpool is bigger than it's ever been before. The London Magic Convention is getting, its record numbers. Why in today's world are we still going to magic conventions, do you think?
Well, I think magic conventions started as community. And if you go way back to the beginning, from what I've been told, professional magicians would go to the magic convention because they could see all their friends. They would have a gathering. And so they would block that week out. They're touring, playing nightclub spots for traveling around. And they could come to the convention. And when they were there, they wanted to show off some of their new stuff they had been working on. So this was a communal point. There wasn't video, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't long distance service very much. So I think it's always been that. You know, we sort of created a list of the four things that the four decisions people make, or what shapes their decisions. One is cost, one is city, the four C's, one is content, and one is community. Now, when I mentioned those to Charlie Fry, Charlie said, "You missed one." I said, what's the fifth one? He says, "It's the fifth C, it's crap. They're going there to see the new crap." Okay, I put that under content. Just like Hudson said, the ads were content in the magazine. This is content. The show is in the dealer's room on the opening night. But the most important things, not cost, not city, the most important are content and community. For a new magician, content is very, very important. For an older magician, community. It's shifted to community. And I think the reason is that as magicians, we're the only ones who can really appreciate the skill in magic. For instance, if Derek Delgadio was here and he was dealing centers and I'm doing an invisible deck, the audience might think, yeah, well, that invisible deck was great. I don't know about that other guy, but the invisible deck, that thing was unbelievable. And so we know that here's a highly skilled performer. We can appreciate him. Often, I don't think the audiences can. And also, friendships, to talk about the skill required and to talk about the insight. We're a communal community. That's a terrible phrase, but that's it. We can share stuff with other magicians that we can't possibly share with the rest of the world.
Yeah, we like to know about the journey, don't we? We like to know about the journey of a thing. So, for instance, if you're talking about a routine that you've been doing, you'd like to talk to other magicians that this failed 5 times in a row and I couldn't get it to work. And then I tried this other method with a string and I tried another method with a magnet and that wasn't working. And that's the sort of thing that you probably wouldn't do just on a text message or a WhatsApp. That's like around the coffee shop or around the bar area when you're chatting that, and you can only really get that at a magic convention, I think, or the magic circle, or or whatever. But it's really for most people when there's a big gathering.
Yeah, I think that somebody tells a story and somebody says, "Oh, well, that reminds me of this, and then that reminds me of this and this," and we're telling stories, and suddenly, a day has passed by. I used to go up to Caveney's and come home 12 hours later. My wife said, "What'd you do?" And I go, and she was one of her nicknames. "You guys can piss a day away quicker than anybody I know." Yeah. Yeah.
I do love that about magic conventions. I love that. I've said this before. I love that the creators are the celebrities. I love that. That's where as they should be. They're the people. It's the only place in the world where they can truly get the recognition that they deserve. The other thing that I really loved about Magic Live was the party on the last night was just this. Oh, it's just this place where we can all be social and talk and it's like normally, some conventions it's just like lecture, show. And I loved actually there was just this thing at the very end where everybody just got together and were social. It was great. And I will say this, Stan, I hope you'll accept this it will sound like a criticism, but it was an uneducated criticism. from England, when I used to look at Magic Live, I used to look at the price and go, blimey, it's twice as much as Blackpool. Having now been to Magic Live, I do get it. I do understand the curation of the event, the fact that you put on a big party where there was food and, and when you arrive, you get these wonderful gifts and things on arrival. It is. So anyone listening to this, if you've never been to Magic Live, we have a lot of people subscribing in the UK and Europe, and you go, wow, it's, it's a lot of
But
money.
that's also because the Blackpool's too cheap, isn't it?
It is really, isn't it?
We spoke about
I
this
think
before.
so.
That's one of the other things. You can't really compare it. I mean, and the other thing that, let's be honest, where would you rather be, Blackpool or Vegas? I mean, for me, Blackpool, because it's a lot nearer. But if I had a second choice, yeah,
I've always had a good time
the Vegas of the
Blackpool.
UK. Yeah, no, it's really good fun. But it is Vegas, and also you have cheaper hotel rooms, right? So you have a deal with the Orleans, and you get the cheap hotel rooms. That's one reason why a lot of these other Magic conventions, they're not quite as successful, I think, sometimes because where it is.
Well, part of that is the formula. They're going to spend X number of dollars. So between registration and hotel, how much money is that? Well, if it's the IBM convention or the SAM convention and they hold their price down, or Blackpool hold their price down, but the hotel rooms are much more expensive, they're still spending the same amount of money. The difference with us is that we get more of that money to throw the convention with. So we're able to build venues, theaters, take time on tech. And our whole philosophy is that when you book a talent, it's the who, what, how theory. And you got to get through all three. Who do you want to book? Okay, fine. What is it you want them to do? Because we always want them to do something they're not expecting we want them to do. I mean, we had, Young and Strange, and they were hosting a general session and doing a talk for us, and so we didn't put them on a stage, So
Yeah, good.
So
good.
What do we want them to do? And then the third thing is, how can we make that look great? And that's the secret. We had a show called The Little Big Show where we took parlor acts and we put them on a specially built stage with raked seating, and there were a dozen or more moving lights to give all the effect in there. At times, we don't have a dozen lights like that on stage, and so we put them all in here. And so, the how. So who do you book? What do you have them do that's unusual? And then how do you make them look? That's the way we approach it, that we're going to go that extra mile. And there's a lot of expenses that we incur that people would be so shocked at.
I will say that was our experience, actually. We've done a lot of Magic conventions over the years, and traditionally you get booked, which is great, but then they go, do whatever you like. There's proper curation with Magic Live. Stan and his team were involved in every element of what we were doing. It was all scripted and looked at and considered and edits made. And Stan, I would say it's to any magician who gets booked for Magic Live, actually, Stan and his team really know their audience, and you should take their advice. Because actually, if we'd have just gone on and done what we were planning to do, it probably wouldn't have gone as well as it did. Because Stan edited us in a way that was going to work great for that audience. Stan, you probably don't know this, but I consider myself a bit of a broadcast journalist. I'm going to ask you a question here. It may have no answer, or it may have a very interesting answer. Has Magic Live outgrown the Orleans? Is it time to move to a bigger venue, considering how quickly it is now selling out?
Well, if you're looking at it on a spreadsheet, yes, of course. But in looking at all the venues available to us in the Las Vegas area and what the Orleans allows us to do with those rooms, I mean, we load into that starting on Wednesday night. So from Thursday, we're in the building for 8 days and we control that entire space for 8 days. And so it's really hard for us. It's not a 5-star hotel. We know that. And you're not paying those prices, but the meeting rooms, the team that's there that work with us, boy, they let us do a lot of stuff. And so overarching, the answer is no, it hasn't. And so we're just keeping it at that 1,600 and saying, and that's the new challenge, is how do you continually pay the bills? We came out of COVID, we raised our prices 2.5%, inflation went up 13%. Okay, I'm not great at math, but I have a feeling that's going to bite me eventually here. And so now we start looking and say, are there other ways that we can do things? Can we do sponsorship? Can we sell something? Can we, is it possible to do a public show or onto it or something, So we are looking at that because I still think magicians, we're going to hit a ceiling. And it was like in Magic Magazine. I was always afraid of one too many ads. Now, I don't know how many that was, but I was just afraid that someday somebody was going to look at it and say, this magazine is all ads. That means we've stepped over the line. And the problem when you step over a line, when you go to step back, the line's not there anymore. The line is way back. We couldn't drop one ad and look any different. We'd have to drop 10, 12, 15 ads to look different. And so, yeah, Magic Live, it's a complication because I think that if we go over $500, we're going to have to break $500. I don't think it'll be in 25, but we're going to have to break $500. And that's going to be a hurdle, and we will lose some people there.
Hudson, ask him if the magic convention business is a good business.
Do you make, how much do you make from it, Stan? Is it good money for you?
It pays the bills.
That's as
between
good as
a magazine and a convention, 3 children, 3 colleges. This last weekend was a wedding, the 3rd wedding, and somehow we had 5 sets of braces for 3 kids. But the community has been very supportive of what I've done. So. Yeah, grateful.
And of course, you got Young and Strange cheap, right?
We were cheap. We're always cheap. We're always cheap.
They paid us a little bit.
Yeah, good.
That's what I meant, sponsorship thing. Normally don't do that, but we figured we could have one bad act. It wouldn't sink the whole convention, right?
They put us on at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Competition.
They put us on at 10 o'clock in the morning. No one saw it. It was great. I will just say, Stan, my highlight actually of the convention, I had a very lucky experience, which was actually when I just came to see you and we sat in your office for an hour and chatted. I loved that. It was great. Right in the middle of everything. And Stan and I sat down for an hour and just chatted about the good old days. It was fantastic. Should we play 20 magic questions, Hudson? What do you think?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Okay. Here we go. 20 magic questions. If you had to be trapped on a desert island with one magician, who would it be?
I'm going to go with Johnny Thompson when he was still alive. Because Johnny Thompson had the most amazing memory and he remembered the most amazing stories. So I think it would be very entertaining.
What's the first thing you do in the morning?
Get out of bed.
Fair enough.
I don't know what you're expecting from that question, Young.
All right, we'll change it.
I know.
Should we change it from next week? We'll change it.
It's a terrible question. Right.
All right, we'll change
right.
it.
I will do this. I will say this. I make the bed every day. We make the bed every day. And for some reason, it's the first thing I accomplish in my day. It's not big, I realize it, but it's an accomplishment.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get rid of it. Will you make a suggestion? Why don't you make a suggestion? Okay. By next week, you come up with a new question. What is it? 2. Question 2.
Yeah, right, okay. Next question. The best magic show you ever saw?
No question. It's Magic 1967. And by the way, best because I was 17. And the whole second half was John and Kathy Daniel doing spectacular illusion production numbers. I dreamt up new illusion shows for months and months and months and months and months.
What is a magic trick you wish magicians would stop doing?
Oh God, just one?
Yeah.
Let's go with the highlights. Dancing cane, zombie ball. Okay, if I have to pick one, pick a card tricks.
Yeah.
Huh?
Fair enough.
Weirdly, I don't think anybody else has had that answer, have they? And
I thought he was going to be the first one to go after the thread workers by the jugular then. The first 2 were thread workers stuff, weren't they? But,
The most famous person you've done a trick for?
I guess performed for would be probably Hugh Hefner. performed with Cary Grant.
Oh,
Cary Grant did a trick at the AMA, and I assisted him and worked closely with him on doing that trick.
that's a cool.
That is good. Who is the first magician you saw live?
Oh gosh, I have no idea who it was. I remember seeing him, and he had tables, and he vanished some kind of livestock in a tear apart box, but it must not have made big impression because it was 3 or 4 or 5 years later before I got interested in magic.
The magician you text or speak to the most?
Oh yikes, that's hard because I talk to a lot of people on a regular basis, but probably my old friend Caveney, probably.
What is your favourite magic book?
It's a tie. It's all stage. The Harbin book, the Christian Fechner books, and the Wakeling book. All stage.
What is a gig that you'd love to do?
Well, I love big spectacular things. I haven't done them that much, but I love big spectacular things. But I did do halftime shows for the NFL in the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and the Rose Bowl. So those were 2 big venues. The only other one, I guess, would be New York City's Radio City Music Hall. I sure would have liked to have done that.
What is the most expensive magic purchase you've ever made?
Okay. Couple buddies of mine, and we were about...
It's more than $29 for a rabbit.
Yeah, $28.50 for a rabbit.
Sorry,
Very
I was
expensive.
rounding up.
Yeah, that would have been the cheapest, I think. A couple friends of mine and we bought an entire illusion show from somebody and paid $10,000.
Well, it must have all been hooky if it was that cheap, wasn't it? Was it hooky?
Oh,
It must have been a while ago.
yeah, come on. This was before those old days. You remember 1990s? Way before that.
Right, fair enough. Fair enough.
A trick or routine that you'd love to do but you can't?
Pepper's Ghost.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great answer to that. Yeah, that is a great answer to that. That is something I'd love to play with. And if you missed it, by the way, we had Paul Keeve on the Awakening special. If you haven't listened to it yet, he talks all about the way that he did the magic in Ghost the musical. And if you're on Spotify, you can even watch clips of it. So, just thought I'd mention that. If you had to do an illusion...
He does get to play with those fun toys.
Amazing. If you had to do an allusion to music, what song would you use?
Right now, it would be the finale to the movie East of Eden.
Ah.
You guys should go look it up.
Again, Young. It's one I can't hear in my head. Like
I think as soon as you hear it, you're going to recognize it, especially you.
Right,
You're
okay.
going to recognize it.
I think Copperfield, the music Copperfield used for flying was called East of Eden. But I'm not sure if it's from that film. Not sure.
What is the biggest lie magicians tell themselves?
That people like pick or card tricks?
What's something in magic you've been putting off?
The next Magic Live? Actually, learning a good pick a card trick. I've been putting that off.
A dead magician you wish you could have a chat with?
Wow, there's so many. Dakota.
If you had to get a magic tattoo, what would it be of and where?
I think it would be on my wrists, inside of the wrists. On one side, it would do better, and the other side, I think, would be grateful.
Best place magic has taken you?
Oh, no question. Home.
What's the last thing you do at night?
Well, I mess up the bed.
Again, another terrible question. Let's get rid of that one as well.
Yeah, all right. It's your job to change it.
Okay. Who have you enjoyed speaking to more today, Young or Hudson?
So is neither an acceptable answer in this thing? No. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to go with Young just because he came out and did Magic Live. Hudson, come out and do Magic Live, and then.
But he already bored you to death for an hour at the convention when you were busy, and you had to be polite then. Like
I was hiding. He just happened to be in my hiding place for that hour.
That is true. I was literally sat in his office and I wouldn't leave. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
Hudson, can we just take a second? You have had a terrible run on question 19 for a while, haven't you? Like a really bad run. Okay, and Stan Allen, please give us your Mount Rushmore of magic, your personal 4 magician heroes.
Gosh, I mean, my heroes are people who took time with me and influenced me. And so my Mount Rushmore would be Marvin Roy, Channing Pollock, Billy McComb, and Hank Morehouse, who I worked with on magic conventions and learned more about than anybody else. Kind man. But those are my 4, Marvin, Channing, Billy, and Hank.
A brilliant 20 questions there, Hudson. So are you going to change question 2 and question 18 to something more interesting? Is that, you don't have to do it for next week, but maybe the week after. How does that sound?
Okay, all right.
That's your job.
Yeah, give me 2 weeks.
Next week, by the way, on the podcast, we have Andrew Golder, the producer of one of the 2 producers of Penn and Teller Fool Us. He's going to be here with us. It's going to be a really great, interesting chat all about that TV show, all of its history, and also Andrew's history before Fool Us as well. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Stan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I could genuinely listen to you all day. You are just such a great storyteller. And I just want to say this. You know what? I'll just say this. I hope it doesn't sound out of place. But just thank you for everything you've done, all the magic magazines, the amazing magic lives over the years. Thank you, because I mean I don't think there's many people, if anyone, you could say has contributed more to magicians' enjoyment of magic over the last 30 years as you. So thank you for everything you've done.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and I am certainly grateful to the magic community and grateful to you guys. I've had a good time. Thank you.
Great stuff. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Go back and check your feed for the other podcasts which we added this week. We'll be back again next Friday with Andrew Golder. Have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so thanks for coming, Stan. Thanks for the record. That was really good. Obviously, we're all shooting off now, but is there anything that we missed out or were you happy with that?
Well, I was happy with it. I was just surprised you didn't ask me how a magic trick landed me in jail.
Is this? I thought this was a joke. Is this a real thing? You went to jail because of a magic trick?
I did.
How did this happen?
Well, first of all, poor judgment, which is probably why most people go to jail.
Yes.
So the Long Beach Mystics, a little junior club that I was in, some pretty impressive people have come out of this club. We were all friends as well as junior magicians together. And somebody would get a bad idea, and there was no adult supervision to our club, so there was nobody to say, you can't do that. So someone came up with the idea of taking a vanishing birdcage and going up to a trash can, the kind with the dome on top and the little flap door on it.
Yeah.
And looking around to make sure nobody's watching, so everybody's watching. And then you reach in with the cage and you reach inside the trash can, and then, you just run your hands out and the cage goes up your sleeve and you come away and you look suspicious and then you sulk away. And people then go over to the trash can and start digging inside the trash can looking for the gold cage with the little bird in it. So this is the night, like the Saturday night before I'm going to go to high school. So that's my mentality. I'm a junior high punk. And so we decide we're going to go down to the Pike, this sleazy place, and carnival rides and barkers and tattoo places. And I'm sure lots more that I didn't even know about. And so 3 or 4 of us, and they say, Stan, have you ever had a vanishing birdcage on? No. Well, here, put mine on. So I have a vanishing birdcage on for the first time. We're walking down, and I've got this cage out, and a police officer comes over to me and says, excuse me, is that one of those cages that folds up, goes up your sleeve, and you pretend to put it in trash cans to make people dig through the trash can? And I'm sure I said something intelligent like blah, 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 blah. Turns out he had fallen for it with other couple guys had gone down the week before. So I can't imagine what his life was like at the station. So he does not arrest me. But as we're leaving that night, we're running into pool halls and things as we're going back to the car. And I was getting pretty good at practicing this vanish. So I go into this pool hall, and as we're walking out, there's a lady with a big stick, blocks the door. She's at the cash register. Go get it. Go get what? Go get the bomb. Oh, the bomb. Sure thing. So I go back and I pull the cage back out. But I've been practicing, and it just seemed like a good time to debut the trick. That's where the lack of judgment came in. So I go, yeah, it's quite a bomb. She starts yelling that it exploded.
Oh.
And suddenly 2 police officers arrive, and she says, I exploded this bomb. And I was underage, and I was out past legal curfew, whatever time that was. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And so they basically take me down to juvenile hall and lock me up in a cage, take all the props and everything. And they call my parents, and my father has to drive 30 minutes across town to come and pick up his criminal. So yes, a vanishing bird cage plus
That's amazing.
poor judgment equals jail.
There you go. That's the bonus footage right there. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, so I do get paid more money now, right?
100%. Yeah, you speak to Hudson about that.